Hello and welcome to the Geeks Review. I'm Royce.
And I'm Jacob. Now, Scooby-Doo is a cultural icon. He's been around since the 60s. He's been featured in cartoons, live-action movies, video games, various merchandise, what have you. And today we're going to discuss the first two live-action movies came out in the early 2000s. But first,
we were going to have a review of the new animated film Scoob here. However, Jake, you started to watch it and you said you couldn't get through it. it's
not that the movie was bad, it's that it didn't feel like Scooby-Doo because of the voice casting. Now, no disrespect to the people who did the voices. They're very good, fine actors on the big screen, live action, but they weren't the Scooby-Doo cast.
No, which is what you want.
Yes, especially since they even recast Matthew Lillard, who was the direct successor to the original Scooby-Doo voice actor.
That was Casey Kasem, wasn't it?
Yes. He voiced Shaggy for decades.
Fun fact, Frank Welker has actually been voicing Fred in Scooby-Doo since the very beginning and does to this day. And he's currently the voice of Scooby-Doo.
What I wouldn't give for a job that secure.
Well, Frank Welker is also known as Megatron, and Curious George, he's a very versatile actor.
He is. He's been around for a long time, done a lot of very memorable characters, and thankfully, until Scoob, he was basically Fred in everything.
Pretty much, yeah.
Another reason why Scoob just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, I was going to watch it. It was meant to be, come out in theatres, but it's currently on Foxtel to rent for $25. So I said a big no to that.
Yeah, it's excessive for renting.
Yeah, make an informed choice if you want to watch it.
The animation is fantastic. I will say that now. It's got brilliant animation.
Do you know who does it?
Not off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
But instead of Scoob, before launching into Scooby-Doo, I was going to talk very quickly about Shaun Micallef's On the Source, which is a documentary series which is airing Tuesday nights on ABC One and it's available to watch on ABC iView. Shaun Micallef does this documentary which examines Australia's relationship with drinking and alcohol. And as he is a long-time no drinker himself, and the series is framed as him, his own son, rapidly approaching drinking age, he decides to talk to various people around Australia in various different walks of life to determine why people drink. It's an interesting series. I think Shaun Micallef, he's been around for a while. He's kind of the right guy to kind of make a series like this. He's not too preachy. He's not too... he's got a very dry sense of humour. Most people like him, So he doesn't come across as especially condescending, even though he does sort of come out with this wit and with this sort of intelligence and this like very high class, attitude. But it feels like an act. It's quite interesting. It is eye opening, and I think it will really encourage discussions among people as to why they do drink. Because a lot of people, they do find themselves in isolated areas around Australia, and they turn to drink either as as a comfort or to deal with everyday stresses or extreme stresses, and some people just drink because it's the done thing and don't really question it. And it does get a bit emotional because you're obviously dealing with the more serious complications of alcohol and all that stuff, but it is handled sensitively, and I think it's quite well done. And I honestly, it's making me want to check out more of Micallef's stuff because I've sort of overlooked him over the years, and it's good to watch ABC again, if I'm honest. I've sort of fallen off the wagon when it comes to watching ABC content, but check it out. It's on iView, like I said. But now, the reason we're here is to talk about Scooby-Doo. So 2002 and 2004, Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed were released. I believe both were directed by Raja Gosnell, who's directed such cinematic classics as Beverly Hills Chihuahua.
Classics is a very strong term in there, but yes, you are correct.
And written by James Gunn, who's of course now known for Guardians of the Galaxy. And
yes, as well as Slither and a lot of other cult classics.
Yeah, as well as doing the upcoming Suicide Squad film for DC Comics and Warner Brothers. It stars Freddie Prinze Jr. as Fred, Linda Cardellini as Velma, Sarah Michelle Gellar as Daphne, Matthew Lillard as Shaggy, sorry, cut you off there, and Scoob as Scoob. Hey.
I'm actually not sure who voices Scooby. I'm fairly certain it is the actual Scooby-Doo voice actor, though.
Probably Frank Welker.
Yeah, I believe it is Frank Welker. First things first, while the movies aren't perfect, I will say the casting is.
Yes.
The casting is fantastic. Matthew Lillard is the live-action Shaggy. He is Shaggy brought to life, and I'll always love him for that.
He's great, and he's a very versatile actor.
Oh, he's brilliant. He's been in all manner of things, and a lot of also horror movies with Sarah Michelle Gellar, of all people.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cast of this is very subversive. I don't know if that's a word, but like, I mean, Matthew Lillard was in Scream.
Yeah.
Sarah Michelle Gellar was in Scream 2, and I Know What You Did Last Summer with Freddie Prinze Jr., and of course she's Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And now married to Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah, long time married, like 20 plus years.
Yeah, an actual decent relationship out of celebrities, who'd have thought?
Yeah, it's fantastic, actually. And Linda Cardellini was in Freaks and Geeks, which isn't a horror, but it's a sort of teen drama, which, you know, is the kind of the cast of crew. I mean, that's the cast of the characters in this. They're teenagers, meddling kids.
The cast is essentially, well cast, because these actors all have a history playing characters like this, characters a bit more out there, the teenagers, the rebels, the outcasts. And they do a fantastic job, even if they do put a different spin on the characters. For instance, Fred, portrayed by Freddie Prinze Jr., is less the gallant trap-laying leader and more of a giant himbo. But I think it's fantastic because it's hilarious, and it is played as, that's dumb.
Yeah.
It's not designed to be, this is Fred, he is a brilliant sex icon, every woman wants him. It's, Fred's an idiot and needs to calm down, but you love him anyway.
And as well as making the female characters much more capable as well, because, I mean, Daphne, it sort of explores in the first film that she was just, you know, the damsel in distress who was always being captured by the monsters, and here she strives to make herself more capable. It's like the characters became self-aware.
Yes, and I also feel Sarah Michelle Gellar's new portrayal of Daphne was also inspired by her time as Buffy.
Definitely, yeah.
Because you see Sarah Michelle Gellar, you think Buffy, you think kicking butt, taking down monsters, what have you. And she does a lot of that in the movie. Which is nice to see.
Yeah, and written by James Gunn.
Who's brilliant with dialogue and humour. It was obviously cut back a lot by the studio, as you'd expect. And limited in what he wanted to do, but you still see his genius shine through.
Yeah, I mean, even very recently he did say that they wanted to make Velma a lesbian.
Which I think makes perfect sense. I always assumed she was. So.
It's widely assumed by basically everyone who watches Scooby-Doo that she must be. And they wouldn't let it because, you know, it was 2002 and, you know, stick in the muds.
Yeah, because they're cowards. Because they're scared of brilliance.
Yeah. This was apparently going to be a lot more adult in nature. Like, I mean, same deal with Shaggy. Shaggy must be a hippie who, you know, smokes pot, so, you know, that was something they were going to have in the film. I mean,
and you can see all the references to what he wanted to write in the series, but you can also see the studio forcing to put in a lot of unnecessary toilet humour.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I'm not above toilet humour. I don't think anyone should be above it. I think that's just being asinine. But there was more in there than needed to be, and you could tell when it was the studio telling James Gunn to put it in there.
That was a very early 2000s, mid-2000s kids movie thing, hey?
Oh, yes. Everything had to be all farts and gas and slime and Nickelodeon.
Yeah. Oh, Nickelodeon. There was actually a film I saw very recently, which was Nacho Libre, starring Jack Black.
Good Lord.
It was directed by the same people who did Napoleon Dynamite, which is... I only watched it fairly recently. And yeah, it does live up to the hype, in my opinion, that film.
It's certainly unique.
It's certainly unique. But Nacho Libre, I watched that very recently as well. And it's not perfect. I'm not going to say it's a great movie, but I'd say it's a good movie that is buried under mandated Nickelodeon fart jokes, much like Scooby-Doo is. It's sort of a shame that they couldn't go for a more adult tone with Scooby-Doo to swing back around to the original topic of conversation.
I do feel like if they'd been allowed to do it, they could have made something very memorable, very good.
Yeah.
And you could see, like in the second Scooby-Doo movie, the sequel to it, you could see the studio had a lot more impact on what was done, even more so than the first movie, because the second movie was not good.
Yeah, I watched that for the first time.
To put it politely, it was less than stellar.
I mean, there's some interesting stuff in there. Like, there is a sort of comment on fake news to a degree. Like, Fred's words are taken out of context and...
But there was things in that movie that you could tell would have been good if they'd been allowed to make the movie they wanted to make. But it more just became another vehicle for silly shenanigans, toilet humour, studio mandated laughs.
Speaking of studio mandated, there is a part in Scooby-Doo 2 where Shaggy and Scoob take potions and they transform each other. Like, Shaggy becomes like a monstrous, hulking, muscle-bound man, and Scooby-Doo becomes the Tasmanian Devil. And the original plan was for him to turn into the cartoon Scooby-Doo. But the studio said, don't do that because we don't want people to compare the animated Scooby-Doo to the CGI Scooby-Doo.
Which is ridiculous because people are always going to compare them. It's just what they're going to do.
Yeah, and people presumably knew who Scooby-Doo was. Because, I mean, Scooby-Doo to this day is still getting reruns, and I mean, there's constant reboots.
Oh, yes. The latest one leaves a bit to be desired, but
Yeah.
it's still going today. It's still being new series remade. They're still showing all the old series on Boomerang and all that. They're all still pretty easily accessible.
Boomerang, that's still around, is it? Wow.
Yeah, but I knew I felt old when I went onto Ozstar the other day, flicked on Boomerang, and Adventure Time was on there.
Really?
And that's when I knew I was old.
But for the plot of these films, the first one begins with the Mystery Incorporated splitting up and then coming back together a few years later by a new mystery on a fantasy tropical island overseen by a guy played by Rowan Atkinson.
Always nice to see.
Always good to see, yes. And of course there are real monsters involved, because as the opening of this film does put out there, that there's always a creepy old guy in a mask tormenting kids.
It was an interesting choice to make the monsters real monsters. And it could be argued good or bad.
Yeah.
I'm of two minds. On the one, I think it's a fun, fresh take on the thing. Let's make the monsters real. On the other hand, it does make it feel less Scooby-Doo. And spoiler alert if you haven't seen a 2002 movie about Scooby-Doo, but the big villain is revealed to be Scrappy Doo. And I think they should never let Scrappy Doo come near the movies. Scrappy Doo was a mistake.
Yeah, even back in the 60s or 70s when he was introduced, he was just a cutesy sidekick character which they introduced to, I don't know, appeal to kids.
And no one really liked him because he was just annoying and loud and there.
The film does acknowledge, though, that no one liked him, not even the Mystery Incorporated liked him.
That was appreciated and funny.
Yeah.
Albeit with a pee joke, which was strange. You think he'd be taller trained at that point, but given he has sentience and self-awareness, but...
Yeah, even more so than Scooby himself.
Yes, he speaks more fluent English, but he was somehow still more annoying.
I think, there is hints of brilliance in the scripting, and the directing by Raja Gosnell is not... It's not bad. I'll say that. There's a definite, he understands how to make a film. This isn't like Tommy Wiseau with The Room. He knows how to make it, but it's just when it is fart jokes and when it is, just pandering to kids and that. It's... I know I'm trying to defend Raja Gosnell here. But yeah, there is a definite skill. It takes skill to make a movie. It's not just it's not easy. And
he does know how to make a movie.
Yeah.
He just gets lambasted at every point by the studios, like all the best ones do.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have enough of a catalogue, he wasn't popular enough or well-known enough, he couldn't just tell the studios, I'm not doing this. Whereas directors like Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, they have a big portfolio, they've got a big footprint, everyone knows who they are. So they can go to the studios and say, I'm not doing this.
Or they have the determination, like someone like Quentin Tarantino does, to stand their ground and go, no, this is what I want.
To be fair, Tarantino will stand the ground against anything, no matter how small and insignificant.
Yeah. So, maybe it is just the fact that, he's a safe director and they just thought he'll do what we say, and he does.
And I think that is a big thing. The studios knew they could take him and push him around because he was happy to get the job. It was a big name job. It helps put him on the map. But they didn't give him the freedom that he would have wanted.
You go and talk about the monsters being real in this, which is actually a common theme in a lot of Scooby-Doo expanded media, apart from the TV series, because that was the done thing. It was always an old man in a costume. And I remember a lot of the direct-to-video movies which they would make would often be, a real witch or a real monster or a real... Aliens, yeah.
Or they'd have the most baffling celebrity cameos. Korn.
Korn, really?
One time they had Korn on Scooby-Doo. That was brilliant. They've had some very interesting guests on Scooby-Doo.
Oh, John Cena, I know, of course.
Oh, brilliant. Hilarious.
That was even before the meme, where it plays his theme as he runs down and wrestles a boulder.
Back in the day, even today, he was a very popular wrestler.
He is, yeah.
So it's no surprise that he showed up.
Competing with The Rock to be the most charismatic, big-time wrestler turned movie star.
Quite a humanitarian too. He's done most most Make-A-Wish visits, which is always good to see.
Yeah, he's a good man, John Cena. But also Penn Jillette and Teller, who doesn't talk.
Always nice to see them too. I'm a big fan of Penn and Teller.
Yeah, they are good. And they were in Scooby-Doo.
There's been some very interesting guests.
There has.
Harlem Globetrotters, which was the well-known basketball team.
That's right. And they had Batman and Joker and Robin in the 70s.
Times they've crossed over. Not to mention there's also the comics where they have even more crossovers.
Oh, yeah, with every other Hanna Barbera
Oh,
character.
Hanna Barbera characters: Batman, Robin, Superman, Space Ghost, Coast to Coast. Honestly, I've said as much as I can say on the movie itself, context-wise. I could sit here for hours and talk about how brilliant I think Matthew Lillard is as Shaggy.
Yeah,
and how much of a crime it was to recast him in the new Scoob movie, because he is now Shaggy. There is no other Shaggy. It is Matthew Lillard.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm not even going to attempt it.
Oh, no, I couldn't try. It's just he looks like Shaggy. It's like someone took Shaggy and thought, let's make him a real person. Boom, Matthew Lillard happened.
Yeah, and he is an actor with range, because I mean, you look at him in like Hackers or Scream, or his appearance in The Good Wife or *Halt and Catch Fire*, and he's completely different to Shaggy. He's completely different in every role he plays.
Oh, he's a brilliant actor.
Yeah, and he doesn't get the credit. And I think actually we're talking about cultural impact with these films, because we're both of the age range that we were kids when these came out. And, you know, you've gone and got like online culture, memes and stuff where this was, you know, meme to hell and back. I mean, Shaggy is an all-powerful entity that, you know, used only 2% of his power.
That was a meme that came out of nowhere. It stayed for far longer than anyone expected, and I thought it was brilliant the whole time.
It could come back now, and people would appreciate it.
I'd be happy for it to come back. We need all-powerful Shaggy to come back again.
Yeah, and just like using 2% of my power, I'm back.
Oh, God. I want to know what spawned the Shaggy meme. It's just, I guess that's the nature of the internet, isn't it? These things just appear. Just
like, this is funny, let's put it out there and see if people buy it, and, you know.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
I love that Matthew Lillard himself even tweeted, like, what the hell is this? And then a day later, he posts himself in the costume. I only use 2% of my power to do this, or something like that.
It was good to see Matthew Lillard. He embraces being Shaggy too.
Yeah.
Like, he loves being Shaggy.
I think, of course, by having James Gunn, you know, behind the scenes with this, has definitely made people go like, oh, okay, we like Guardians of the Galaxy, we like everything else he's done. And to look at this and have a more critical eye of it, or a more appreciative, you know, stance on it.
It has caused people to look into the movie more and to look past the more juvenile jokes and all the studio mandated nonsense, and they can start to realise all the little nuggets of treasure that are hiding in it. They're thinking, hang on, there's some real good stuff in this movie. What could it have been?
Yeah.
And that's always the sad part in movies like this. What could it have been?
James Gunn was going to direct the second sequel to this, but because the second one did so badly, it was cancelled.
Which is a shame.
And it was going to see them go to Scotland and find, you know, real monsters again, terrorising the townsfolk. But then they realised that the townsfolk were actually the villains, and the monsters were the ones being oppressed, and it was going to make Scooby-Doo and Shaggy question their beliefs and their ideologies when it came to judging other people. It sounds interesting.
Interesting, but it sounds very off-brand for Scooby and Shaggy.
Yeah.
They're not thinkers.
No.
And nor should they be forced to be thinkers. Scooby and Shaggy are accidental heroes. They're bumbling buffoons. They're lovable idiots. And that's what we're all here to see. I'm happy to take characters in new directions. It's fun to see that and all that. But there are some things that just, to work with that, if they could do that while maintaining their character still, it'd be interesting to see. But it's hard to envision that with Scooby and Shaggy.
It feels like it would have been very, like, because obviously it never happened.
Yeah.
So you can say that, but it's kind of like those crazy, you know, fan theories or like fan productions where it's like, we're going to take full Bagpuss in a direction. Not Bagpuss. That's a British TV show, British kids TV show. We're going to take Yogi Bear and have him examine the AIDS crisis, for example. Yeah, it sort of feels like taking it in this really offbeat direction.
Or we're going to take Johnny Quest and have him experience the Third Reich. You can see there's the connection, but that shouldn't be made.
I don't actually know what Johnny Quest is.
Oh, that's very old Hanna Barbera.
Oh, yes. Is there a connection? Is that something that's worth exploring?
Oh, it's not worth exploring at all. It's just they were just Aryan heroes, you know, your typical very white bread.
Oh, yeah.
Blonde hair, pale skin, you know, the kind of ideal that you'd see. He was a great dude. Johnny Quest's a lovely boy, very young, nice young man.
Space Ghost was actually an old Hanna Barbera thing, which was reinvented.
Quite successful.
Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Same with Birdman into Harvey's Birdman Attorney at Law.
Yeah.
Which were subversive parodies of the original series, which were both brilliant to see. Had all their villains and sidekicks come back as either TV show presenters or lawyers, respectively, and that was hilarious to see. And it was completely out of character for the characters, but it still worked.
There is the iconic scene with Harvey Birdman featuring George Jetson, and it's made me realise that, we've had the Flintstones, we've had Yogi Bear, we've never had the Jetsons in like an attempted reboot or revamp.
And that, I think, is a big reason for that, is because the future the Jetsons envision came and gone very quickly. We have surpassed most of the technology they would have had, except for sentient robots and flying cars. But most of the stuff that they had that seemed brilliant and amazingly advanced, we've left behind.
Yeah.
So to do the Jetsons, you'd have to completely revamp them. And do people need the Jetsons these days? Do we need that dream of the future?
Yeah, they're probably formulating something now, hey, in the bowels of whatever production company has the rights.
What can we profit off next?
Yeah, they probably will. And it'll just be, it could be brilliant, it could be just Scoob.
Which has the potential to be good.
Yeah.
But they just missed the mark. Which is just a shame to see, because it could have been good.
I think with the Jetsons, it is the retro-futurism. So you don't want, whiz-bang, future. You still want that style. You still want... But you could be more jokey with it. Like when George Jetson says in Harvey Birdman, I come from the far-off year of 2000, and Harvey Birdman looks at the calendar and it says it's 2004.
Exactly. If they did it more tongue-in-cheek, it could still be quite funny. And it could just be a retrospective of what used to be, what we used to want to aspire to, what we used to dream of.
Or even make it like a straight-up parody of like 1950s, 60s sitcoms, family sitcoms, and then just twist that like, the Brady Bunch movie did in the 90s.
Yeah, it could be good. Could be fun. Could be a disaster.
Could be.
It also depends on who you get to handle it.
Yeah.
And who you get to play the roles, because that's a big part of these movies.
It's because it was like a more family-friendly property that they've then, like with Scooby-Doo, they decided, no, we're gonna sanitize this and take away any edginess that you've put in this James Gunn.
Exactly.
And turn into that. But then you've gone and got the Banana Splits. Are you familiar with them?
I am, yes.
Who made a comeback last year in a slasher film.
Haven't seen that one. That's interesting.
Yeah, it really paying to the whole Five Nights at Freddy's sort of aesthetic. Yes. So where the Banana Splits are, not people in costumes, but they're animatronics, and they go nuts and start killing people brutally.
That sounds fantastic. I need to watch that.
It's an interesting reinvention. I'll say that much. My mum used to be a fan of the Banana Splits, and when she saw it, she's like, "Is this real?" And I'm like, "No, it's not real." "Oh my god, it's real." But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, let's turn the Banana Splits into horrifying murderers.
Because why not? It's popular. And sometimes it works. One example for live action Hanna Barbera cartoons is the Flintstones live action movie.
John Goodman and
objectively not a great movie, movie-wise, but the acting and casting was brilliant. John Goodman was the perfect Fred Flintstone. Like, he was brilliant as Fred Flintstone. And I think, given a movie that's a bit better written, it could have been great.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I quite like John Goodman.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he looks like what you expect a live-action Fred Flintstone to look like.
Yeah, totally.
So I could see that working quite well. But the movie tried to be too adult, too edgy, too for the parents.
Did it? I remember Halle Berry in one of her first film roles was in like a, fur bikini or something. Was there more adult humour to it?
It was more just a lot of gambling, a lot of adult jokes.
Right, yeah.
Which, by itself, not a bad thing. It can work, for there's always been jokes for the adults in all kid shows, which are always good. But it seemed to lean too heavily on wanting to make it more gritty, realistic, more grown up, more what Fred would be like in the real world. And that just kind of took some of the charm away from it.
Yeah, I think if you can blend the two. I mean, you talk about family friendly. I mean, Fred Flintstone used to earnestly promote cigarettes.
That was
back
very
in the
much
60s.
a different time.
Yeah. Is it worth a rewatch, do you think?
I'd rewatch it just out of curiosity's sake.
Yeah.
Just to compare it to get memories of it, if you have any. If not, it's fun to see. It's always fun to see how people reinvent characters.
I remember there's a scene where Barney and Fred almost get lynched.
Yeah,
that's a bit
It took
weird.
some weird directions in that movie.
Yeah, so they let that happen, but wouldn't let James Gunn.
Yep, what are you going to do?
Oh, well.
I think that about covers it for Hanna Barbera live action cartoons and Scooby-Doo, off the top of my head. I didn't have time to rewatch all of them. There's a lot out there, but maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future. Anyway, this has been the Geeks Review. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with a review of Quentin Tarantino movies. Tune in for that if that sounds good. I'm Royce.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you next time.